Welcome to a very special episode of our podcast of The Record. Some of you have asked us how such a podcast is actually created, and we have also received a lot of input on other aspects of cultural change. We then thought about how we could combine the two, and we came up with a solution. Today we record in front of a live audience and have 3 exciting guests with us, but more on that in a moment. Welcome to our cozy podcast studio. Dashi, we're at episode 6, halftime so to speak. How are you doing?
I think I say before every episode that it's a special edition for me. And I'm always excited, and I think it's going to stay that way.
We've talked about a lot of topics since June. Strengths, error culture, creativity, growth mindset. What has stayed with you in particular?
I remember especially the first episode. I don't even know how many test recordings we had. Hundreds. It was really jaw-dropping, the first one to X, and bloopers. 2, I think twice as many and still today. That's part of it anyway. And your highlight?
I've actually found all the topics very exciting so far, but I would say that I found the discussions with Jörn about error culture and with Toby about creativity very enriching, because I believe that these are the topics that help me the most, both for us as a company and for me personally.
The beer story is actually also a learning experience for us. Our podcast should actually be called Beer After 4. But to make it sound good in all languages, we renamed it Off the Record. And the idea is really great. I just think we should have paid more attention to the time in some episodes. Some of them were quite early or we recorded early in the day.
Right from the start, we wanted to look at the topics from a critical perspective. Do you think we've managed to do that so far?
I think so. We have been very nice. We've also had very nice guests. And they have always answered our questions diligently and well. And we also asked questions. That's true. Would you do anything else?
I'm actually quite satisfied. I would perhaps approach the issue of translations differently, because on the one hand, I'm very fascinated by what the AI tool we use for translations can do, but it's also annoying. It takes so much time to get the quality right. At the same time, a lot of humor and spontaneity is lost.
We've also often mentioned the joy of experimentation. And the willingness to experiment also includes having the courage to see if something works. Just like today's episode. And I think it's time for our first guest.
Since October, Sina Riedle has held the position of Head of Compliance at Siemens Switzerland. Today, we have the pleasure of discussing ethics with her. Welcome to our panel, Sina Riedle. Sina, why is ethics so important?
Hey, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Eray and Dashi. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I think you've created something really great, and it's super nice that I can be here today. So, ethics is important because it is important to us as a company that we make decisions not just based on economic benefit, but our values guide us towards a sustainable and balanced approach that I strongly believe in. And that ultimately makes us a better company. It makes the decisions balanced, sustainable, and gives us the opportunity as a company to create value in society and do something good. And if we look at today's world, it has become totally complex. We have AI in our lives just like you are using it now. We have wars in Europe. We see social divisions on different issues. The role of companies, especially big companies like Siemens, has completely changed, I would say. People out there, be it our own employees, suppliers, customers, expect from a company like Siemens that we take a social responsibility, that we are committed and that we act responsibly as company. And ethics create the framework for us. In order to reach informed decisions, it is necessary to analyze intricate scenarios, engage in discussions, and ultimately find a suitable and fair resolution.
To what extent have we as Siemens in Switzerland become more ethical?
I believe that, as with all cultural issues, anchoring ethics in our culture simply takes time, which we are allowed to give ourselves. What we are noticing is that the questions we are being asked have increased since awareness of the topic was raised. And these can be questions such as, to what extent do we want our technology to end up at a defense company? Or how do we behave if a customer behaves disrespectfully towards a Siemens employee? What if a supplier does not align with our values? How should we proceed in such a situation? People come to us with these questions, they want to discuss them, they want an attitude, and I think that's the benefit of the whole thing. Simply that there is a framework, a platform, a culture to address and discuss them, and then ultimately be able to make a good and balanced decision.
And how can we as employees support this and also behave more ethically?
I don't think it's that complicated, and ultimately it starts with ourselves. We ourselves can act as role models and set a good example by serving as a multiplier for our Siemens values. And as mentioned, the world has become complex. There are complex issues. If we create an opportunity to discuss such issues or even everyday discussions, such as the example earlier with a customer who makes disrespectful comments, that we create a framework to discuss such issues and consider how to proceed or how to move forward. And what I find very important, it has something to do with integrity, taking responsibility for your own behavior, and ultimately also inclusive environment where different opinions and voices can be heard. Even critical opinions, that these voices have a space to be illuminated. And I also think it's very important to learn to be able to reflect for yourself and then adapt your own actions.
So in summary, you could say that compliance is a question of attitude.
Yes, that perhaps sums it up quite well. And compliance can also take on a moderating role here, be able to bring different opinions and different people to the table and to conduct a discussion in this way together.
You've been head of compliance for almost a year now, and has there been any situation where unethical behavior has been stopped?
What is definitely the case is that people come to us and say, hey, how would you rate that, or how do you rate that? Should our technology end up with a defense contractor in Turkey, for example? In other words, such questions are really examined, looked at, and ultimately we always discuss this with the business and with the management of the business or with sustainability so that we have a comprehensive picture. And you can really say that this has increased an awareness of these issues.
Very nice. Thank you for your comments, and thank you very much for joining us. Did you know that the average age at Siemens Switzerland is around 40?
That fits perfectly because we have some really young people here now. The next guest is really young and has been with Siemens in Switzerland for a year. And we are looking forward to hearing his perhaps somewhat different perspective on the topic of cultural change. Welcome, Nico Kunz. Nice to have you here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me.
Nico, you're a second-year automation technician. Why did you apply to Siemens back then?
First of all, it has to be said that this is my first apprenticeship. That means I have no idea how something like this works, how it's done. Siemens is a big company, so I'd heard a lot of good things. It was actually my favorite job right from the start, so I applied for it. And why did I apply to Siemens? You hear a lot that Siemens has a very good apprentice workshop, that you get very good training, and that you also have a good future in your job if you do your apprenticeship at Siemens. And I was very pleased about that and wanted to try it out.
I think we have a perfect ambassador for employer branding here. The right decision, I would say. From your perspective, what has changed this year since you started?
As I've only been here for a year, I can't say too much yet. Not much has changed in vocational training this year. The only thing that has changed a lot, especially in the last 3 years, is working from home. This has probably increased a lot during the coronavirus crisis. It was no longer possible to do business well with the protective measures, and I think it has increased a lot. Unfortunately, we weren't able to live this out in vocational training. Many would have liked to work from home a little more, but I think that's a good thing.
How do you find working with colleagues, those who have been with us a little longer?
I find it very exciting because the older people who have been with us for longer have a lot of knowledge. They can teach us that, or we can share our knowledge. And so the young people can also benefit a lot. And perhaps the slightly older people can also learn something from the young ones. Maybe they can learn a bit from us about how we approach certain things. I just find this collaboration exciting. I've already learned a lot from it.
Do you have a specific example that you could explain or teach to an older person?
I can't think of anything at the moment, but maybe something I was able to learn from slightly older people, that maybe you shouldn't always think so much about what you're doing, but just go for it and see what happens. Of course, in more delicate situations, you should take a more considered approach to the whole thing, but I think that's something I've learned.
It's an exciting way of looking at things. Very cool. And I think we can really learn a lot from you too. Thank you for your visit, and very exciting to hear a younger perspective.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me be here.
Cultural change is not just an issue at Siemens in Switzerland, but also worldwide. We would now like to talk about this global perspective with our next guest. Welcome Alex Senn, Head P&O at Siemens Smart Infrastructure.
Nice to be here.
Alex, you've been with Siemens since 2018. What has been the biggest change in the area of cultural change in the last 6 years?
Before I answer that, I'm so proud of Nico, and it makes me so proud to be working for such a company. I would never have sat down at 16 and talked like this. A huge compliment. But back to your question. We have set 2 anchors. One is the growth mindset and empowerment. I've been with the company for 6 years, as you said. When I look at where we are today, we are already 2 or 3 steps ahead of Siemens. I'm deliberately not saying SA, deliberately not global, but Siemens. There is a culture, not an SA-specific culture. We have a Siemens culture. That is very important to me. May I take this opportunity to say what I would like to see more of when we talk about culture. We still need to get better at empowerment. We can all get better at the growth mindset and orchestrate it even better. But what I think is still missing a bit, and I'm not excluding myself here, is a feedback culture. I think we don't give ourselves enough feedback. And I don't just mean what we can all do better, but also what we are already doing well. We don't celebrate enough at Siemens. And for me, feedback is with the teams of peer-to-peer, supervisors with their team and team members. That's what I would like to see. I don't know how you see it, but Siemens still has some catching up to do.
Yes, there is always room for improvement.
You said that there is only one Siemens culture. Nevertheless, there are around 60,000 of you employees at Siemens Smart Infrastructure all over the world. Different time zones, different cultures, religions, countries, languages. How do you still manage to establish a culture and an identity?
We all have to learn to speak the same language and establish an anchor, as we said, with a growth mindset and empowerment. And then it's important that we think about how we can get this out into the world, and then also listen to what the country-specific things that need to be taken into account. Culture. And I always say that there is a framework when we talk about culture, but that really understanding what that means for us is very country-specific, perhaps even partly business or business-specific. It depends on the situation a business or a team is in, the maturity of where they are. And I think this exchange about culture is enormously important. We can orchestrate that. That's why we also need the countries to conduct this dialogue in the local teams, that we bring the teams together and say, what does it mean for us? Empowerment. When do the team members feel empowered in the team? What processes do we use to measure this? Or do we question processes? Do these processes support empowerment? I believe this exchange is extremely important. The challenge is that we provide the framework globally, but also always have our ears wide open and listen to the countries. Last point. What I would like to see, and you are right about this, is less of corporate initiatives, but implement them in the countries. That should also happen. But what I would like to see is that we are an ecosystem, that we learn from each other. If an initiative is created in the country, that we also globally or that other countries adopt it. I think we need to scale up better. It doesn't make sense for Siemens if we do our own thing in every country, but that we exchange ideas with each other, stealing with pride. I would like to see that too.
You just talked about the challenges. Sometimes it's small steps that we can take to change something, to make a difference. What would that be from your perspective?
Starting with yourself. That's the first thing. You can always complain that we're not good at it, that your line manager isn't good at it, that the company should do something about it. We should all look in the mirror and ask ourselves what we can do to contribute to cultural change. That is, for example, giving feedback. Speak up culture. These are elements that will help push the whole thing forward. One last point that always helps me, that I see the glass half full. What is working? Where has someone changed and is moving in the right direction? And not just be negative. That helps me to see the change. You don't change a culture overnight. We don't change overnight. It takes time. You fall back again and again. Perhaps we also need to start talking openly about topics as managers where we still have some catching up to do. Take me, for example. I don't listen enough. I take people to task. It upsets me myself, but it's extremely difficult for me to somehow slow down my pace. I hope people take that with them. Feedback, feedback, feedback. Give me feedback if I speak too fast or if I fall into words. I hope I did well today.
I would like to follow up on that directly. You said something very important, the speak up culture. And a speak up culture requires an environment. This grants employees the sentiment that they have permission to speak and that they are able and willing to do so. They desire feedback and the opportunity to express their thoughts, even if something may have gone wrong. What can managers do to create this environment? So very pragmatically, just to say, because it's a journey, as you said. It goes forward, 3 steps back, 5 steps forward again. To keep at it, but also to say, okay, we can help and support with very small means to make this possible.
It starts with ourselves. The first question is whether I want to hear feedback as a manager. That is the basic requirement. I hope everyone answers yes to that question, because feedback makes you grow and make you a better leader. I said in another podcast, if a leader tells me from a scale of 1 to 10, already on a 10, then the person has not understood leadership. You will never be a perfect leader. Every day is different. Every situation is different. We are only human. Leaders are also just people with feelings and mistakes. I believe what I want to say is a basic prerequisite for wanting feedback. Honestly, want it, but then also creating this environment. I think you can achieve this by talking about your own mistakes, about issues that you haven't yet got under control, by showing yourself to be vulnerable. That opens the door. Then, of course, you can incorporate it into team meetings by having short feedback sessions, practicing and training this, and then perhaps starting with small baby steps. Last point, you can also help your bosses. Give them feedback in a one-to-one. Have the courage. I may be bold now. If a manager can't take a feedback, maybe that's the wrong manager for you. Everyone deserves an environment where the manager listens and supports you and is your coach. I really want us all to move in the right direction. Managers too. Now I have given a lot to the employees as a task. Managers are first and foremost required to do their job. We have expectations. That is clearly described.
And the expectations are high.
Thank you. That was a very nice ending. A nice appeal to the employees. Thank you for being here.
So let's get back to our favorite part, which should never be missing. Beer break.
Beer break.
Our favorite drink. We always ask our dear guests what they bring us and tell us the story behind it. What have you brought us today?
I discovered coconut water during my summer vacation.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers.
That is healthy.
But of course, it's also another one of my legendary transitions, experimentation. This will also be one of the next topics we will be discussing in the remaining 5 episodes, alongside diversity, empowerment, adaptability, and collaboration. I'm really looking forward to it.
So now is the perfect transitions. Let's really round off the evening with a little apéro. Dear colleagues on site, thank you for being here.
A big thank you also to Sina, Alex, and Nico for your input. That was very exciting. And of course, thanks again for listening. See you soon and ciao, everyone.
See you soon.